Meron, you produced the live production of Jesus Christ Superstar that aired on NBC this past Easter, and you've done a number of these live musicals now. So what made you want to tackle this particular show?
Well, you know, Bob Greenblatt, who is the chairman of NBC, and Craig Zayden and I, after the success of Sound of Music, we kind of put together some sort of mystical list with a bunch of titles that we should consider at some point. And Jesus Christ Superstar was always on that list because we've all had an affinity for it and we all loved Jesus Christ Superstar growing up. It was very, very significant to me just in terms of what a musical can accomplish with a somewhat challenging subject matter to turn it into a rock opera. It was all kind of like really kind of inventive and bold at the time, and I've always felt a connection to it. So after we did Hairspray Live, Bob called one day and he said, Jesus Christ Superstar, Easter Sunday. I thought, well, that makes perfect sense. And we went forward and we decided that we wanted to tackle it more as an authentic rock concert than actual sort of book musical, which was the original intention.
And where did that idea, how did that affect the approach to the musical to do it as a live kind of rock concert, and how did that affect the logistics of it?
Well, we went back to the original conception of it with Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, because they had always conceived of it as more raw, stripped down, trying not to make it too like a theater piece. They wanted it more of an audience-friendly, direct-to-the-audience type of presentation. So we went back to that original concept. And how it affected us in terms of the other musicals is that was the first time that we really acknowledged the audience as part of the event. And we thought it worked spectacularly well, just in terms of how connected the audience felt to the piece and the type of kinetic energy that it brought to the actors, to the presentation, to everything. That so it was, we didn't quite know exactly how energetic the audience would be until we actually did our first dress rehearsal, and we were just kind of, whoa, this is like really, really a lot. And then certainly it prepared us for what was going to happen on show night. And we were wondering that, is it too much? Like, is the audience really applauding at inappropriate places? Like when Judas betrays Jesus and they started applauding, and they were applauding the vocal pyrotechnics of the performance, and were they paying attention to the plot? But we decided that we would just go with it because it's how people were experiencing it live.
And would you say it was more or less logistically challenging than the previous live musicals that didn't have such an audience, almost participatory element to them?
Well, all of them have been challenging. So there were I can go through each one and name the specific challenges, but on this one, we had to deal with a live orchestra, which I don't think any live musical has done in terms of the modern era. And we decided to place them on stage to kind of enhance that concert experience. So it was more challenging in terms of mixing the sound, making sure the sound was right, dealing with the 32 musicians and about the 45 cast members, and getting that right. So that was a particular challenge of this, as opposed to the other musicals. In the other musicals, we've had challenges like Peter Pan's flying, or on Hairspray, we were doing more of a live movie musical than we were a live Broadway musical. So there were particular challenges in terms of how many locations we had, and shifting very, very seamlessly between scene to scene. So here we had to have the challenge of the audience, the live orchestra, the sound, and just kind of balancing that all together.
And The Sound of Music was about 5 years ago, 2013. So over the course of those 5 years, as you've done more of these live productions, what have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned about what really works when putting these things together, and maybe what doesn't work?
Well, I think the biggest lesson after Sound of Music was to not feel daunted by it all, because to kind of not be freaked out with anything can happen, but to kind of embrace anything can happen, because that's why we're doing it live, because that is kind of like the excitement for the audience to tune in, because anything could happen at the moment. So what I've learned personally is to just kind of have this air of calmness and to embrace anything that could happen.
Is it really a calm experience once you go through all those months of anticipation, and then on the night it comes down to one performance, 2 to 3 hours, one shot, that's it?
Yeah, I mean, by the time we get to that one performance, we hopefully, and we have been really well rehearsed. So, and then everything else is up for grabs, and then you just have to just deal with it as it happens or not. You know, cameras getting into the shot, or people forgetting lines, or people singing flat, or people not being able to hit the notes. I mean, that's part of the live experience. So, you know, it is somewhat calming knowing that your work is done, because the train has left the station. It's either at 8 p.m. that night. You know, it's kind of go with God, and in this Jesus Christ Superstar, we actually did go with God. So, and in terms of the seamlessness between all 5 of the live musicals we've done, I think Superstar was the most seamless, and we didn't really have any sort of accidents whatsoever. And I think it was because of the concert presentation, because everything was so contained, as opposed to the other 4 that we've done, where everything has been very, very spread out. So I think, in a way, being on that stage helped us a lot, just in terms of logistics and the ability to not have things go as wrong as maybe some of the others have, in terms of sound, in terms of cameras, in terms of lighting. This certainly was technically the best of all of them.
And how much creatively did you want this production of Jesus Christ Superstar to draw inspiration from like previous versions that have been on stage or on film, versus really charting your own path for this one?
Well, I think we decided that we would chart our own path with it, because, you know, for better or for worse, there were problems with all the previous productions. Frankly, I think the production of Superstar that we all did was the Superstar that we all wanted to see. So we didn't really rely on any of the other productions for inspiration. What we did have, we had a director who had a singular vision that matched the vision that Bob and Craig and Mark Platt and I had for the piece. And what we did have in common with all the other productions was we didn't change a single word or change an orchestration. This is how it's always been written and performed in terms of the text. We just decided that we would go for this kind of more raw, event-like nature of it.
And you've got John Legend in the title role. Everything is sort of centered around, he's, of course, an incredible singer, and, he's performed and he's done some acting. What made you think of him as the right man for this job?
Well, it's an interesting question, because John was like, when we first acquired the rights and we were going to move forward, John's name was tossed around just for a moment or two, and we said, oh, he'll never do it. So we never really even made an official offer to him. And then we were talking, as we were going through our casting process, we were talking with Harvey Mason Jr., who is our music producer, and Harvey has produced for John Legend. And he said, have you guys ever considered John Legend? And we said, yeah, but we never really did anything because it's, you know, ridiculous to think that he would do it. And then he said, no, 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 I'm friends with John. I know all of his people. Oh, should I ask? And we said, absolutely. So he made a phone call, and then I think that same day he sent us an email and said, John is interested. Speak to his management. And we went, no. And that kind of started the ball rolling, and he jumped on board. The first person that we actually cast, which we wanted to establish some sort of rock cred to it, was Alice Cooper. He jumped on board because Tim Rice had a previous relationship with Alice, and Alice had actually, I think it was in 2000, did a recording of Jesus Christ Superstar where he sang the role of Herod. And we thought, well, if we're to establish some serious rock cred and some performer cred, Alice made a great choice. And actually, people like John and Sarah Bareilles were thrilled that Alice was on board. So that kind of helped make it all easier.
And in addition to you have these big stars from primarily the world of music. Of course, Sarah Bareilles has some theater experience recently, and then you've got theater vets like Brandon Victor Dixon and Ben Daniels. How important was it? Yeah, how important was it to flesh out this cast with people who had these long trained kind of theater chops?
Well, first of all, in terms of Brandon. Brandon is kind of a gift. And Andrew and Tim wrote a score that is impossible for mere mortals to sing. I mean, especially the role of Judas, which is challenging to anybody. But Brandon walked in and he actually auditioned for us and just kind of knocked us out. And he was always the person to beat. He came in the first day of auditions. He was sensational. And then we went through the usual rigmarole of the audition process, but we kept on circling back to Brandon. And it was really, really important because those roles, Judas and Caiaphas and Pilate, are the underpinnings. They really ground the production in some sort of dramatic viability. So it was really important to us that we have those trained theater people come on board to just kind of like flesh out all the other voices and just the entire feel for it. So we consciously went after theater people.
Now, after this, there's a live production coming up of the play A Few Good Men, which, of course, is a play, not a musical.
Right.
What kinds of unique challenges are you expecting for that to pose compared to one of these, musical extravagances?
I mean, in terms of, I think it will be better in terms of the technology for a play than a musical because you don't have as many moving pieces. But what the true test of A Few Good Men will be is whether or not the audience will want to come to see a live play. And that really hasn't been tested yet. So we went for a very, very well-known title with a great writer in terms of Aaron Sorkin. And we will put together a phenomenal cast, and hopefully that will be a lure to an audience to watch. So the big challenge, I think, is for A Few Good Men is more like an experiment. Will the audience show up?
And you mentioned that once you started with the Sound of Music, that you had kind of a wish list of shows to consider. How many shows are still on that list, or are you still looking for more?
It's not a very long list because we have certain criteria for the shows that we choose, just in terms of it being a really well-known title, some well-known music. We have, we want to make them more family friendly. So, the list, there are a bunch of titles certainly left, but the list isn't a long, it can be exhausted. It can be exhausted in a couple of years, and then we'll see,
Are there any on that list that you feel like you can talk about, or that you still kind of...
No. You just have to wait and see. And people always want to know what's on the list, what's next. Well, until we, it's always very sensitive in terms of rights and getting rights. And so until it's closed and it's all the contracts are signed, it's kind of bad luck to talk about things that haven't happened yet that may or may not happen. So we just kind of keep it kind of close to the vest. Maybe if I'm drunk enough, but then again, I don't really drink that much.
Well, in addition to Jesus Christ Superstar, this season you also were one of the producers of the Lifetime TV movie Flint, which, of course, is a drastically different kind of production. What made you want to tackle that story, which is in many ways still very much ongoing?
Well, how could you not want to tackle that? I mean, what was inspiring to us is there was a Time magazine cover story, and it kind of gave us an entree into how to tell this story dramatically, because there was this group of women that actually were the whistleblowers, that they were kind of like soccer moms or just people with families that were economically challenged, and then having this put upon them just inspired them to action. And we thought that that was a very relatable story. And just in terms of the projects that we've done in the past, we've taken on some social and political issues in terms of our work. I think we're more well known for the musical work that we've done. But over the course of my career, we have done things like the Serving in Silence, which was a Greta Kammermeyer story, which was about the first woman that was thrown out of the military because she was a lesbian. We took on the topic of gay adoption, which we did with Whoopi Goldberg, and Barbra Streisand was our co-producer on that, as she was on Serving in Silence. We did a miniseries, a very controversial miniseries, which became a single movie that was aired on Showtime, called The Reagans, which was about the relationship between Ronald and Nancy Reagan and what was going on in his political life. So we have tackled things, but I think we're better known for the musicals, but we do like to be aware of what's going on to see if we can do our part for the greater good.
Well, I want to congratulate you on Jesus Christ Superstar and Flint this season, and wish you the best of luck with A Few Good Men.
Whatever's on that list.
And yeah, and whatever is on that list.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. We're sending out the good vibes. We want to see everything else that was on that list.
Well, thank you.